Effective immediately, Alec Morrow is reassigned to basement ops coordination, Landon declared, smirking like he'd just discovered gravity. The room fell into that sharp silence you only get when everyone's pretending not to witness a car crash. I was 2 chairs down from Alec, same laminated conference table, same sour coffee fumes, but I swear I felt the whole floor tilt. Alec didn't flinch, not even a twitch, just blinked once, slow, like a man counting heartbeats at a funeral that didn't need to happen. I'd worked under Alec for 8 years. The man didn't do chaos. He was a systems builder, a cleaner of messes, a fixer of other people's disasters. He once kept this company from folding during a merger that went sideways at 3 a.m. on Christmas Eve. And now he was being demoted by the CEO's baby-faced spawn, Landon Walker, a man who wore sockless loafers and unearned authority like cologne. Landon leaned over the glossy oak table like he owned it. No hard feelings, Alec. Time to give the next generation a little room to innovate. He slid the paper forward like a smug magician revealing a card trick no one asked for. Alec's lips curved. Not a smile, not exactly. More like he'd just remembered something funny from a decade ago and didn't feel like explaining it to children. "May I keep badge access?" he asked. Landon barked a laugh. "Sure, I mean, what damage could the basement ghost do, right?" I felt something shift then. Not in Alec's face, not in his voice, in the air, like someone had flipped a breaker you didn't know existed. By the way, real quick, if you're watching this and haven't hit subscribe yet, it'd mean the world to us if you did. It's free, and 97% of people who watch these stories never subscribe, which kinda hurts the team's soul. Also, drop a like if you've ever watched a pompous idiot dig their own grave in real time. Thanks, and trust me, this one only gets wilder. Anyway. Alex stood, tucked the demotion slip into a manila folder so plain it may as well have been invisible, and nodded once to no one in particular. Then he walked out, past the window, past the whiteboards, past the stunned silence of every junior analyst who suddenly realized they'd witnessed a mistake you couldn't Ctrl-Z. Landon swiveled his chair like a toddler discovering momentum. "That went well," he muttered, looking around for validation he never earned. I held my tongue, but inside something was already writing an obituary. Only it wasn't Alec's name on the line. It was Landon's. The restructuring memo had landed Friday night like a poorly wrapped grenade. Vague language, lots of agile verticals, and lean cross-functional autonomy. In plain speak, power grab. Landon had been playing musical chairs with people's titles for 3 weeks. It started with minor tweaks. Executive Project Coordinator became Innovation Scout. One VP got bumped to Strategic Growth Consultant, which meant no budget, no team, and no seat at the table. But Alec's title? That one was different. He wasn't just Director of Operations. He was Operations. He had his fingerprints on every contingency plan, every vendor lock clause, every internal control matrix buried in the bowels of the company's infrastructure. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud, but every time things fell apart, Alec was the one who pulled them back together. So when he packed that one folder and took the stairs down to the basement, voluntarily, I knew something had been set in motion. Not reaction. Preparation. See, Alec didn't play defense. He played long game. And Landon? Landon had just taken the first swing in a fight he didn't even realize he'd started. The following Monday, Landon turned the all-hands into a one-man TED Talk. Lights dimmed, slide deck up, buzzwords flying like mosquitoes at a campground. Visionary restructuring, dynamic talent refresh, legacy phase out. You could practically hear the brand consultants high-fiving behind the curtain. He paced the stage in his tailored quarter zip like he was about to pitch a crypto startup on Shark Tank. Then came the moment. He stopped mid-slide, leaned on the podium with that slimy coach grin he thought made him relatable, and said, "Some folks have been here since dinosaurs roamed. That's not a dig. It's just, well, eventually you've got to make room for fresh legs." The room chuckled. Polite, nervous. A few of us looked at Alec. He didn't move. Landon beamed wider. Which brings me to our next wave of performance-based realignments. Alec Morrow, we thank you for your service, but it's time for a new era. He held up a single sheet of paper like it was some kind of sacred scroll. Effective today, Alec will be transitioning into our newly formed role, Basement Ops Coordinator. You'll still be part of the mission, just from a different vantage point. He winked, like this was all some inside joke Alec just wasn't cool enough to be in on. Alec stood slowly, straightened his cuffs like he was checking the time, not responding to humiliation in real time. He stepped forward, took the paper with 2 fingers, and studied it like it was a riddle only he could read. Then, soft as a paper cut, "May I keep badge access?" Landon laughed, tossed his hands up. "Of course, you're still family." Alec gave the faintest nod and walked back to his seat. That was it. No protest, no HR speech, no last stand. Just that small nod like a chess player watching a pawn fall exactly where he meant it to. I saw his screen flicker on before the meeting even ended. While Landon droned on about strategic decompression, Alec opened an archive folder buried 5 levels deep in a drive I hadn't seen touched in a year. No flourish, no password drama. Just a slow double-click and a document marked, "Trigger, Clause 7B, do not touch." It was the kind of file you don't open unless you already know exactly what's inside. Alex scrolled, paused, scrolled again. Then he selected 1 page, 1 single PDF, and attached it to a blank email. No subject line, no body text. Just one recipient. An external legal contact we all vaguely remembered from the mezzanine funding days. 1 click. Sent. That's when I knew this wasn't shock. It wasn't surrender. This was precision. Alec wasn't just reacting, he was activating. There's a stillness that comes with people who've been underestimated their whole lives. It's not defeat. It's quiet geometry. Geometry of control, of inevitability. Landon, meanwhile, kept smiling. He thought he'd won. Thought this was his moment to shine. Thought removing Alec was some kind of weight loss cleanse for the company's soul. But what he didn't understand, what no one up there understood, was that Alec didn't need a desk to run things. All he needed was a signature. And Landon, God bless his Patagonia-wearing heart, had just given him one. Nobody told Alec to clear his desk, but he did. Not in a dramatic, box-stacking, office walk of shame kind of way. Just one manila folder, no bigger than a menu at a diner, tucked under his arm as he exited the floor. No farewell tour, no lingering glances. The elevator dinged, doors opened, and he disappeared downward like an old elevator ghost making his last descent. Some of the newer staff whispered about him. Poor guy. He seemed nice. I heard he saved the company once during the merger. All the usual sanctified eulogies people give while they're still warming the corpse's chair. But I watched him go and didn't say a damn thing, because I knew Alec didn't go anywhere without a plan. And basements? Basements were where old servers hummed, old contracts slept, and things people forgot could be awakened. Downstairs was colder. The kind of cold you don't notice until your joints complain. Fluorescents buzzed like dying flies. The old storage room he chose for his exile hadn't been touched in years. Mostly filled with backup cables, defunct routers, and 2 mismatched chairs from 3 office redesigns ago. He wiped dust from a corner desk with the side of his sleeve, sat down, opened a laptop that looked like it survived the Bush administration, and waited for the VPN to tunnel through. No size, no theatrics, just method. He navigated past the internal network, into a portal none of us touched unless there was a 7-digit reason. It was the investor dashboard, the one used only for mezzanine updates, contract milestones, and funding tranches. Password accepted. 2-factor confirmation. Then he selected a tab labeled Safeguard Provisions, clicked Leadership Continuity Clause, and uploaded the single-page PDF with Landon's signature scrawled in blue ink at the bottom. 1 line above it, Demotion of Alec Morrow, effective immediately. The screen blinked. Then, in soft green font across the top, Trigger received. Control clause engaged. He didn't smile. Just nodded once to himself, like a man turning a final bolt in an engine no one remembered he built. He opened his calendar, created a new invite, and typed a title so mundane it became a threat. Control clause activation. Urgent. He sent it to one name. No body text, no attachments, no explanation. Upstairs, the noise machine kept humming. Landon was still circling departments, gloating about how he was cutting fat and modernizing ops. He was telling someone in finance that Alec had lost his edge, that dinosaurs don't do sass, and that we need wolves, not shepherds. The man had watched 3 YouTube videos on leadership and thought he was Caesar. But here's the reveal no one up there knew. Alec wasn't just a director of operations. He was the named director of operations in the $95 million mezzanine agreement signed with Arcadia Holdings 2 years ago. Back when the company was gasping after a failed acquisition, Alec had negotiated terms buried deep in a clause labeled 14C through stability of key operational leadership. What it meant was simple. Remove Alec without board consent and the investor could call the capital. All of it. Immediately. With penalty. And now? Now they had Landon's signature. Unvetted, unauthorized, live. Up above, they were still celebrating a victory that hadn't happened. Down here, Alec had just pulled the pin. And the thing about quiet men like Alec, they don't need to shout to start an earthquake, they just press send. The reply came at 6:17 a.m. sharp, just 2 words. Reviewing now. No signature, no emojis, just that corporate flatness that usually precedes something seismic. Alex sipped cold coffee from a mug that said Q4 cleanup crew in peeling vinyl letters and calmly attached 3 files to a new email. Landon's demotion slip, the internal HR timestamp logged by the system, and the clause itself, highlighted, annotated, and circled like a final answer on a test he already knew he aced. He typed 6 more words beneath it. As agreed, trigger clause met. Regards, AM. Then he clicked send. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged, like the eye of a hurricane deciding which way to turn. Upstairs, the air was thick with performance theater. Landon had assembled his newly restructured Agility Task Force, a fancy term for a half-dozen yes-men from marketing and 2 engineers who were too new to realize the guillotine was coming. He stood in front of them in an open-collar shirt like a man giving a halftime speech at a high school he never attended. "I just cleaned out dead weight," he said, pacing. "Legacy thinking slows velocity. Morrow was a bottleneck. You'll see. Our throughput will triple." The group nodded politely, the way you nod at a drunk uncle mid-rant because Thanksgiving hasn't even hit dessert yet. Landon went on, clicking through a slide deck filled with buzzwords and color-coded nonsense. He talked about moving to a flatter org chart, decentralizing decision-making, as if he wasn't centralizing all power in himself, and fostering value-forward disruption. If you peeled back his jargon, all he'd really done was remove the one man holding the company's foundation together. Meanwhile, Alec's war room hummed in quiet rhythm. The old Ethernet cable buzzed slightly under the desk. The investor dashboard updated with a line item labeled Clause 14 Activation, Pending Verification. At 7:04 a.m., a private message blinked onto Alec's screen. It was from Elaine Mercer, longtime board member, known for her glass veneer patience and titanium bite in meetings. "You sure about this?" she wrote. Alec typed back without hesitation. "Let the system speak." He closed the window, stood, took a slow walk down the archive row, past boxes labeled Acquisition Prep, Legacy Vendor MOU, Earnings Freeze 2021. Every folder told a story he'd lived, patched, or shielded someone from. And now they were ammo. Up above, Landon was still playing Emperor in his sandbox. He'd started circulating his next big innovation, a biometric sign-in policy that was already violating 2 vendor contracts and 3 compliance standards. His mistake wasn't just arrogance. It was forgetting that Alec hadn't been here for the title. Alec had been the circuit breaker, the continuity fuse between chaos and collapse. Now, that fuse had been pulled. No alarms were sounding yet. No one was screaming. That would come later. For now, Alec returned to his chair, cracked open the manila folder, and began sorting the rest of the documents like a librarian shelving history before it repeated itself. Because when the bomb finally dropped, and it wouldn't come with fanfare or fury. It would come dressed in legal clauses and boardroom silence. The invite came titled Quarterly Innovation Update, hosted by COO Landon Walker, complete with a high-res headshot of Landon in a blazer, arms crossed like a catalog model for arrogance. The call was scheduled for 10 a.m. sharp, agenda attached, slide deck preloaded, background set with a custom virtual banner, legacy out, velocity in. Landon strutted into the 10th floor glass conference room like he'd just been nominated for a tech award. He high-fived a junior VP, adjusted his sleeves, then barked orders at the IT guy like he was directing Spielberg. I want the intro video queued up exactly 5 seconds after my opener. Cut the audio fade this time. Make it punchy. Energy matters. He straightened the mic, took one last look at his reflection in the monitor, and said, "Time to show these money guys who's really driving the ship." Meanwhile, 12 floors down in that forgotten server crypt of a basement, Alex sat in silence. No camera, no lights, just the hum of a backup power unit and the glow of a single screen. He dialed in 5 minutes early. No name appeared on his tile, just a blank gray square labeled User 7. At 10:16, the call began. 6 investor reps, 1 founder liaison, and Landon smiling like a man who thinks he's selling fireworks when he's actually standing on a gas line. "Gentlemen, thanks for joining. I'll keep this quick. We've been moving fast, and I want you to see how we're maximizing throughput. Legacy systems have been decommissioned, and we've moved to a leaner, performance-centered structure." He paused, expecting applause. None came. Instead, the lead investor, Darren Cho, adjusted his glasses and calmly leaned forward into frame. "Before we proceed, I need to ask something for the record." Landon froze just slightly. "Of course. Fire away." Darren's tone flattened. "Has the board formally acknowledged the change of control event?" Silence. Landon blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" Darren's face didn't move. Clause 14, subsection C. The operational leadership role named in the mezzanine agreement has been altered. Alec Morrow was removed from his post without board review. That constitutes a change of control. Are you denying that? Landon's mouth opened, then closed. He looked around like the answer might be hiding under the conference table. I mean, it wasn't a termination. It was just a title shift. Darren cut him off. The clause uses the phrase involuntary reassignment. That includes title alterations. No board vote was recorded. No notification was sent to Arcadia Holdings. That means the breach window is now active. Landon's face dropped a full shade. I wasn't made aware that... You signed it, Darren interrupted, tapping a printed copy held just out of frame. Your signature, dated, filed. Mr. Morrow's title changed effective immediately, without board oversight. That triggers a mandatory stabilization clause. No one told me. Darren's voice went glacial. That clause was co-authored by Mr. Morrow himself. You should have asked why he requested badge access. And with that, Landon stopped blinking altogether. Upstairs, the assistants and note-takers sensed the shift. You could see it in their posture, their hushed typing. A live burial was happening, and the shovels were quiet. User 7 said nothing, didn't unmute, didn't move, because he didn't need to. The call went on, but no one cared about Landon's slides anymore. His efficiency gains were background noise. All eyes were on Darren, whose tone had shifted from disappointed to surgical. We now enter a 72-hour remediation period, he said. Wire the stabilization funds, $95 million, by close of business on Thursday, or we begin recovery, including equity reassignment. The call ended with no applause, no follow-up questions. No one thanked Landon for his time, and in the dark corner of the basement, Alec Morrow sat perfectly still, a silent sniper watching the first domino fall. The boardroom looked like a crime scene waiting for chalk outlines. Suits paced, chairs scraped. Someone knocked over a glass of water and didn't even notice. Phones buzzed with a kind of hysteria that only happens when real money, real power is at stake. And right in the middle of it, Landon sat pale and twitching in a chair that suddenly felt about 4 sizes too big. Then came the slam, door bursting open like a courtroom drama. CFO Denise Hart stormed in, heels echoing like gunshots, a stack of papers clutched in her fist and fire in her eyes. Page 17, she snapped, slapping the investor agreement down on the table like it was Exhibit A in a federal indictment. Clause 14, subsection C, paragraph 2. Any involuntary reassignment of the named operational executive without board vote constitutes a material breach of continuity, triggering an automatic capital stabilization requirement. She stared straight at Landon, You signed a reassignment. No board vote. You triggered it. Landon's voice cracked. It wasn't a termination. He's still with the company. He's just basement ops coordinator, someone muttered. No one laughed. Legal counsel. Julia Campos stood slowly, like she was trying not to rupture her last nerve. She flipped the document and read aloud, "Reassignment. Landon. That word is right there. It doesn't say termination. It doesn't need to say it. It says any involuntary change without vote. This clause was designed to stop exactly this kind of stunt." Across the room, someone cursed under their breath. Another board member put his head in his hands. The founder liaison closed his laptop like that might undo the last 48 hours. On speaker, Darren Cho's voice came back, calm and sharp like a scalpel. "As of this moment, we consider the clause activated. You are in a breach window. If the funds, $95 million, are not wired by close of business today, Arcadia Holdings will begin enforcement procedures. That includes equity transfer and seat revocation." Landon looked around like the walls might jump in and defend him. This is insane. Nobody told me about this clause. Nobody explained. Julia cut him off. "The clause is public. It was in the board packet. Alec Morrow co-drafted it after the 2021 acquisition disaster." Denise added flatly, "You tried to humiliate the one person who built the tripwire you just stepped on." Silence. Everyone turned toward the monitor still glowing at the end of the table. Alec's gray tile, user 7, sat there, still unmuted, still unmoved. He didn't speak, didn't gloat, just watched, like a surgeon letting the anesthesia finish its work before the cut. Landon looked like a man realizing the safety net was made of paper. Okay. Then what do we do? Call the investor. Apologize. We explain it's a misunderstanding, right? Darren's voice replied, cold as concrete. "We don't do misunderstandings. We do contracts. Your only option now is to comply or surrender control. I suggest you move quickly." Outside, phones rang. Assistants whispered. A courier waited for someone to sign something none of them wanted to touch. The building that had once felt like Landon's playground was collapsing in real time, one overlooked clause at a time. And Alec? Alec remained exactly where he was, silent and forgotten, sitting beside an old copier in a room full of dust and steel shelves, sipping now warm coffee, watching the system he built do exactly what it was designed for. It wasn't a weapon when he wrote it, it was a shield. But today it had teeth. They flew the CEO back in on a red-eye from Houston, neck brace still on, pale, tired, furious in that quiet, pulsing way that only CEOs mastered, where nothing moved on the surface, but everyone in the room felt the undertow pulling hard. He entered the executive conference room mid-sentence, cutting off Denise mid-report with just a look. Someone tell me what the hell my son did," he said, each word landing like a gavel strike. Elaine didn't sugarcoat it. "Your son just triggered a liquidity bomb. $95 million. Due today, no extensions, no wiggle room." The CEO turned to Julia from legal. "Is that real?" She didn't blink. Clause 14C signed, filed, enforced. He didn't sit, just gripped the back of a chair, white-knuckled. Why the hell didn't anyone stop him? Julia's voice dipped to a lethal whisper. "He had authority. You gave it to him." No one spoke. Then the door opened. No knock, no secretary announcement, just the faint creak of hinges and the soft squeak of old soles on polished wood. Alec Morrow walked in like he still belonged there, and not a soul rose to challenge him. He wasn't in a suit, no tie, just his usual button-down, sleeves rolled once, folder in hand. No guards, no clearance badge check, just a man entering the room he helped build, the room they'd shoved him out of, and reclaiming it one step at a time. He walked to the center of the table and placed a single sheet down. Printed copy of the clause, clean margins, clear ink. One signature circled in thick red Sharpie, Landon's. Alec didn't speak, just stepped back and let it sit like a lit match on dry kindling. The CEO stared at it, lips parting, then closing again. Elaine, barely above a whisper, said, "You planned this." Alec looked at her, calm, neutral, no smirk, no bite. "I planned for recklessness," he said. He delivered. A slow breath rippled through the room. The board said nothing. No one asked him to leave. They didn't have to. Alec had already walked in with more authority than half of them combined. The CEO finally sat, hands laced, staring down at the paper like it had betrayed him personally. So what now? Alec didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because what came next was already in motion. The bank wires being reviewed, the investors' legal team preparing fallback documentation, and the executive control clause that, if unaddressed, would transfer board seats within 72 hours. The same clause Alec had drafted during the merger crisis, the one he'd pushed for after watching one too many cocky hires nearly drive them off a cliff. He didn't raise his voice, didn't rub salt in anyone's wounds. He simply stood in the middle of the room in the storm his calm hands had summoned, and waited. Because sometimes power doesn't come from yelling. Sometimes it comes from being the only one who knew the rules from day one. The investor's final message came in like a verdict. Blunt, deadline stamped, and as non-negotiable as gravity. 72 hours. Reinstate Mr. Morrow and wire funds or initiate equity reassignment under Clause 14. There were no follow-ups, no warm regards, just a legal axe hanging by a thread. By the end of the day, Landon had been escorted out of his corner office. Not fired, not yet, but suspended pending internal review. They let him keep his access badge, but only because it now opened nothing. His name was quietly removed from the executive Slack channel. The group chat that once buzzed with his hype emojis and half-baked mandates now sat eerily still. He didn't speak when they pulled him from the boardroom. Didn't argue. Just walked out, shell-shocked and disoriented, like someone who had finally realized the house he burned down had his name on the mortgage. At 9:43 the next morning, the CEO walked into Alec's basement office. No assistants, no theatrics. Just a man aged 10 years and 2 days holding a signed reinstatement letter with a shaking hand. He laid it gently on Alec's desk. Then, without being asked, bowed his head. "Should have never handed him the matches," he said. Alec took the letter, read it once, nodded, and placed it in the same manila folder he'd carried down with him 5 days earlier. Then he pulled up his terminal, reopened the internal org chart, and calmly began reassigning access, department routing, and executive tier roles. No announcements, no trumpet fanfare, just quiet clicks and digital restoration. When he reached his own title, he didn't even blink. Director of Operations. He typed in a new line beneath it. Investor Liaison, Clause Oversight. He hit save, then he opened his encrypted folder, the one labeled Trigger Clause 7B, Do Not Touch. He dragged it to the trash, emptied it. Done. Later that afternoon, the board reconvened, tired, ragged, but sharper now. The room felt different, like the furniture itself had learned something. Elaine raised her hand. Motion to prohibit any executive title change or reassignment without prior legal counsel review and board ratification. No debate, no amendments, unanimous. The CEO didn't speak for most of the meeting, but before adjourning, he looked across the table at Alec, not like a subordinate, not like an employee, like a peer, a man who hadn't just protected the company, a man who was the company's insurance policy, the firewall, the failsafe. Alec didn't smile, didn't gloat. He simply stood, collected his folder, walked past Landon's empty chair, and took the elevator back to the top floor, this time without needing a badge. The morning after the reinstatement, Alec arrived early, earlier than usual, even for him. The building was still half asleep, lights dimmed, coffee just beginning to burble on the 3rd floor, silence echoing down the freshly vacuumed halls. He took the elevator to the top without a badge swipe. No one had reset his permissions. No one dared. His new office was technically the same as his old one. Same view, same worn leather chair, same dent in the window frame from a rogue whiteboard back in 2017. But there was something different about the air now. Quieter, calmer, like the storm had finally passed and left the place. Honest. On the door, Alec Morrow, Director of Operations. And just beneath it, a new metal plaque, brushed steel, understated control liaison, investor proxy. He didn't ask for it. It wasn't part of any deal, but someone, maybe Elaine, maybe Darren himself, had it made. Just a quiet signal to anyone who thought titles were just flair on a business card. He opened the blinds, sat down, Powered up his terminal, no ceremony, no press release, just work. Because Alec didn't come back to gloat. He came back to make sure this never happened again. At 9:12 a.m., a new hire passed the door, paused, then peeked in. Fresh face, wide-eyed, probably just out of grad school. "Excuse me, sir?" she asked, voice careful. "I've heard people call you the basement ghost. Is that like a nickname or something?" Alec didn't look up right away. He clicked one last item on his dashboard, finalized a system redundancy patch, then finally turned and smiled. "Because every system needs a fail-safe," he said, voice steady, "especially when they forget who built it." She blinked, not quite sure how to respond, then nodded and walked off. He returned to the screen. No parade, no banners, just the soft hum of an infrastructure that only still stood because he designed it to withstand arrogance, ego, and chaos. The irony wasn't lost on him. They'd sent him to the basement thinking he'd fade. Instead, he left with the keys to the building.